Hey there, Comics Alliance fans. This is Matt Wilson, co-host and producer of the War Rocket Ajax podcast, here once again to introduce a clip from next week's episode of War Rocket Ajax. That's right, you're getting it a few days early. This week, Chris Sims, my co-host, and I are going to be talking about 3 comics that came out this week. We're going to be talking about Batman Eternal number 4. We're going to be talking about Southern Bastards number 1, and we're going to be talking about CMYK number 1. Now, this is going to diverge a little bit into some other territory, mainly about how comic book writing is becoming more and more like TV show writing. We also talk a little bit about Bruce Jones' Hulk, so you can look forward to that. But I think you'll enjoy it. If you want to listen to the entire episode of War Rocket Ajax, where we're talking to 2000 AD writer, Judge Dredd writer, Dredd Underbelly writer Arthur Wyatt, you can do that Monday at warrocketajax.com. But for now, here's this clip. We talked about Batman Eternal when it started with issue 1.
Right, because it's a new Batman book. It's number 1. People might not know about it.
Yeah, we got to get some attention for this Batman comic. But we wanted to talk a little bit about Batman Eternal number 4, which came out this week. This is an issue that sort of changes things up a little bit. Different writers are taking over for this issue. There's a different artist in Dustin Nguyen, and there's a different aesthetic this time around. Instead of everything being brown, there are things that are actual colors this time.
Yeah, as I understand it from the conversation I had about it with Tim Seeley, the idea is that there will be like a 3-issue arc, which would have been the opening setting up with Gordon and the subway tragedy. And then each of the writers will do a one-shot focusing on the characters. That's the next 4 issues. And then there'll be another short arc. So this issue focuses on Barbara Gordon, and it's scripted by John Layman, and the art is by Dustin Nguyen. And it looks like, I don't know why they didn't get Dustin Nguyen to draw the first issue, because this is such a better fit for the story. It's such a better look of the story. It is not that I hate Jason Fabok. I think he's, serviceable. But you and I have had the conversation about him being very much the sort of house style guy. And the biggest problem with that first issue is that it has that introduction where it's talking about all the different bright colors and all the light in Gotham City, and it's just brown and gray. And it's really, it falls flat for me in a lot of ways artistically, even if I'm enjoying the story. Dustin Nguyen, on the other hand, I think is great. I loved his stuff on Detective Comics from the old 86. Is that what we're calling it now?
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen him do a lot in the New 52, other than he did the Little Gotham book that was done digitally.
Right.
So I've been waiting for him to get back and do some more of the mainline stuff. And it looks great. It's bright, it's colorful, without kind of sacrificing the mood. One of the things that I noticed he does is he draws Batman without drawing all the lines on his costume. Like, any panel where he can get away with it, he does not draw the extra lines, so people actually look a lot better than they usually do. I hate the current Batgirl costume so much.
I wonder if that is some kind of a result of this being a weekly book, that it's easier to get away with that. Because I'm sure when other artists have tried to pull that off, they've been sent their art back and said, "Hey, draw those lines."
That's how you're going to see it hold up. Like when people are having to knock things out, drawing all the seams and piping on Batman's costume takes a lot more time than just drawing Batman in his real clothes. That's right.
Yeah.
Batman's real clothes. I said it. I'll say it again.
I mean, I enjoyed Dustin Nguyen's art in this comic as well. I also think it feels like the art in this book feels like the art from a weekly book. It feels a little less finished than some of the art you might see in some of the monthly comics that are coming out.
This book does?
Yeah.
I actually think this book looks great. I think it has just the right level of detail, which is that Batman doesn't look like he has lines all over his costume. But no, it's I like seeing the character stuff show up. That, I think, is going to help keep Batman Eternal from wearing itself out too early. I think it's an interesting way to structure it. And again, I had the conversation I had with Seeley where we talked about the Dick Grayson book coming out, We get into Batman Eternal a little bit in there. So if you head over to Comics Alliance, towards the end of that interview, he talks a little bit about the process of Batman Eternal and how they get together every 2 months in a room and kind of hammer things out, which is really interesting because that's very accelerated.
That seems to be more and more a process that is happening in comics, where we're taking this approach of a TV writer's room to write a comic. And I'm not sure I totally am into that, but I think it's an interesting approach that it'll be worth seeing how things pan out. Because DC's doing that on all 3 of their weekly comics that are coming out. There's Future's End, and then there's the Earth 2 weekly book that's going to be coming out. But there's also, like, I talked to Kelly Sue DeConnick about taking that approach to the Alien books at Dark Horse. The Prometheus/Alien books. Like, this TV approach to comics is becoming more and more prevalent. And I don't know if that's good or bad. It's hard to say just yet, but it seems like a real change.
I am generally for anything that, in the world of superhero comics, anything that forms a cohesive universe. That's the thing I like about superhero comics. That's the thing that I think people like about superhero comics. Chad and I had a conversation when we went to see Captain America about continuity and how, that so many writers have talked about how continuity is the devil and, all we need just done in ones. But that those movies are successful, as Chad says, continuity won. Like, the thing people like about those movies is that there's 9 movies that all work together and make sense, more or less. And that's, even though I'm not... look, I like the Avengers movie. I'm not as hot on it as everybody else. It's my least favorite of those movies. But that they did it, and that they pulled it off as far as, lining everything up right, is the most impressive thing they've done. And I think that's gotten people interested. Because, if you see one of them, you want to see them all, right? This says a guy who has not seen Thor 2 or Iron Man 3 yet. But, that's...
I think there are pluses and minuses to a TV approach to comics. I think there are pluses in terms of consistency. I think there's minuses in terms of pacing and structure, where if a comic reads like a TV show, it becomes a TV show and stops being a comic.
Comics have, I think, a very unique position that lets them get away with it a little bit better. We're very clearly getting Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's vision in Batman, in Zero Year. We are very clearly getting the book those guys want to do. If we can get that vision, and then also get something that builds a cohesive universe, and then spins out into other people's visions that then lead to building other stuff, I think that's a great thing about, for lack of a better term, about corporate comics. That you don't have to sacrifice one to get the other when you're dealing with a character like Batman, where there's 5 Batman books every month, and now there's one every week. That's one of the reasons you get a lot of good stuff from Marvel lately, like ever since they've been having those retreats. Like, you go to the Marvel retreat and people kind of hammer out what they're doing, then they go home and write it. You'd never say that Captain America, the Brubaker and Epting Captain America, you'd never say that lacked a vision of the creators. Yeah, but it also fits in the context of what else is going on in the universe.
Like, I think we're talking about 2 separate things. You're talking about cohesiveness and stories hanging together, and I agree with that. I'm talking also in part about structure, like story structure. And Batman Eternal in particular reads like a TV show with subplots and the way things are structured out. Like, we got to check in with this character this week, It's got a little bit of that going on. We got to move on, but I'm sure we'll talk about this more as Batman Eternal continues.
Hell, we got a damn year of it.
Yeah. All right, the next comic we're going to talk about is Southern Bastards #1 by Jason Aaron and Jason Latour. I love this comic. Here's me seemingly sounding like I'm criticizing it when I'm not. This is not the most original idea for a comic series.
How dare you?
It is about a guy returning to his hometown and finding it not the place he thought originally. And in some ways, I think it even invites comparisons to Scalped, which is Jason Aaron's other crime opus comic. It's someone with a history with it in this town, whose parents have a history in the town, returning to that town and finding people against him. One of the things that I think is particularly striking about Southern Bastards, and maybe something that Jason Aaron wanted to do kind of on his second try on this type of comic, is how much this comic holds back. It's an impulse, I think, for a comics writer to give you as much to sink your teeth into in a first issue. Here's a ton of stuff that's going to happen in this comic, and maybe there's something in here that you'll latch onto, so I can keep you reading.
Those are the kind of first issues, to be fair, that I tend to really respond to, is the ones that come out of the gate hard.
Or that at the very least give you a lot of different stuff to chew on. Southern Bastards, I mean, it's not that it doesn't give you a lot to chew on. Intentionally, like Latour and Aaron kind of intentionally make sure to not show you some things. Like, there is a character who is clearly going to be the lead bad guy that Earl Tubb is going to have to deal with, who is never seen. He's only talked about. That makes him so much more effective as a villain than if he and Earl had a confrontation in the very first issue. You know what I mean? It's a different approach to this kind of comic that I think works really well. Latour and Aaron are doing a very masterful job of building suspense and intrigue, which is not always something comics does in a great way all the time. Like, intrigue is something that comics occasionally has trouble with, I think. And I think that's in part because so many times, like, these mysteries don't pay off in comics. Like, I'm reminded of the Mr. Green and Mr. Blue stuff in The Incredible Hulk.
Back in Bruce Jones times.
Bruce Jones times, yes. Like, that was like some intrigue that I think people got really excited about and then didn't really pay off. I feel like the intrigue here, there's certainly a plan for something really cool and really big that's coming. It's certainly got that feeling. And I'm very excited about where Southern Bastards is headed.
Now, do you remember who Mr. Blue turned out to be?
I legit do not remember who that was.
Yeah, me either.
I would have to look it up to find that out. I'm sure somebody can tell us who Mr. Blue was, although nobody told us why the Watcher doesn't talk anymore, so I don't know.
Yeah, in fact, we heard that the Watcher talked very recently.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. All right, we're going to very quickly talk about our last comic that we want to talk about, which was CMYK number 1. This is the first issue of the brand new Vertigo anthology, one that was released under some controversy because Joe Keating, one of the writers of one of the stories in this comic, posted a Tumblr post saying that the ending, a lot of the dialogue in his story, was all changed by the editors.
And then he was not consulted on the changes, and then was told that it was too late to make any further changes, that it was just going to press with the dialogue that he did not write.
Yeah. I thought this first issue of the anthology was very strange. And didn't really hook me in any real way. And part of me feels like the stories are done a disservice by only being 8 pages. Although some of them, I feel like, at 8 pages are way too long. There's one in particular that is structured as a countdown from 7 to 0 that feels stretched out way past what it should be.
That is a pretty brutal criticism, to say that an 8-page story is too long.
That one felt way too long to me. Now, the Joe Keating story, on the other hand, felt way too short. And the story that immediately preceded that, the story that immediately followed that had the jock art, felt too short. It felt like it was building these characters and kind of building this interesting world. And I'm drawing a blank as to who wrote the story that Jock drew. But it's sort
I
of...
have my copy of CMYK right here.
Okay.
Let's see here. Lee Garbett of Batgirl fame.
Yeah. That story had some really interesting stuff set up about how the lead character is an ice cream man, and that had somehow carried all this responsibility. Like, in the world of this story, being an ice cream man is a big deal. Or at least that's what he tells his wife. And I would love to have seen that fleshed out more, but it just isn't. And then the story ends on this kind of weird cliffhanger that just kind of ends. Like, a lot of these stories just kind of end. And if there was maybe more of a through line that connected all the stories in the anthology, besides just there's a lot of blue in this, I maybe could latch onto it a little more. But as it was, it felt kind of disconnected, and I didn't really have much to hang on to.
I guess you could say it really blew.
There's nothing else to say after that. Those are our comics reviews, everybody. That's it for this week's clip of the early edition of War Rocket Ajax. Again, if you would like to listen to this full episode of War Rocket Ajax, come back to warrocketajax.com on Monday. We're going to be interviewing Arthur Wyatt, writer of some Judge Dredd comics that are really good. We're going to be doing Checks and Recs. We're going to be doing some Every Story Ever entries. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff on that show. It's going to be a good one. Come back and check it out on Monday. For now, everybody, thanks for listening.